Today I want to make some Halloween themed silhouettes to hang on my front door. Now if you would prefer to just trace out a design, I will have patterns available for download on my website, link in the description below, but I am going to show step by step how I drew these up in case you want to try your hand at making your own. When I first had the idea, I was thinking of something possibly quite large, so I first went out to our front door with the tape measure and I was measuring and estimating what sort of size made sense, and I came up with something around 16 by 30 for what I thought was what I wanted. So I needed some paper to draw on, and if you don't have a large roll of paper stashed in your filing cabinet, well, I'm sorry for you, but anyways, you need some large paper to draw on, so tape something together if you have to. And so with a pencil and an eraser, I started doodling, and my idea was like 3 stacked pumpkins. Yeah, that's really terrible. I need to interrupt for a second. When I reviewed the footage, I realized that my light pencil work on this brilliant white paper was just not showing up on camera right now. So I'm going to recreate it, but I'm going to be pressing really hard. Just understand that, just light touches with a pencil are really all you need, as long as your eye can see what you're doing. So with the eraser and some paper and a light pencil, though I'm not going light right now, I'm starting at the top of my silhouette with the witch's hat with a bent point on it. I'm no great artist, but but the pencil is very forgiving because you can, I don't like this. You can just erase it and sketch in again. And remember, I'm recreating this for the camera. There was a lot more hesitation and erasing and scribbling the first time around. You just get the broad shapes to begin with, and then you start erasing and refining and erasing and refining, and I think you get the idea. With a good eraser and some light pencil work, you can keep doodling and changing your mind and doodling and changing your mind. And even if the paper gets really, really scribbled, it doesn't really matter, because then I pull out my Sharpie. And no matter how many scribbles are on my paper, I'll take my Sharpie and I will go over the lines that I want to keep. And when that was done, I had a finished silhouette. And it's like, yeah, there's stains and scribbles on the page, but this is something I can work with. But because I wanted to go the extra mile and make patterns that you can download, and I got some more clean paper and I traced it again. And I traced it again, and I traced it again over there. And this one, I didn't fill in the faces because I'm going to make some other faces so that I can have, say, 2 or 3 options for the faces that I want for my pumpkins. And yes, I know, without the faces on it, it really looks like a snowman. I guess I could use that as a starting point for a Christmas decoration. I thought about just using thick paper or poster board for the silhouette. You could do something like that, but I want this to last for a few years, so I went off to my local big box store and I found this. This is a 2 foot by 4 foot, 24 by 48 inch panel, and it is an 1/8 of an inch thick painted hardboard. And yeah, it's a little bit under 5 pounds. It only cost me about 10 bucks. Now, I had wondered about like some plastic or something, but this is what I found when I was going through the big box store. I also bought this pack of rare earth magnets for hanging it on the door, but we'll go into more detail about that later. So if you're working off of my plans, you're gonna have a whole bunch of printouts that look like this. Each page has a part of the design, and then it has this diagonal grid. I set the grid at 2 inches, and the diagonal parts really help with lining it up. You need to first trim off the white border of your printout so it's looking like this. And then you lay the one piece over the other, and then you line up those little diagonal grids. And then a little tape to hold it together. And then I work my way up the pattern with the other pieces of paper, lining them up as I go. Probably not going to be perfect, but let's remember this is something that I'm going to hang on my door for a couple of days once a year. We're not looking for perfection. So I'm next going to cut this out roughly, just to make it a little bit easier to get on the piece of wood. So let's put it in place. I don't have enough to make 2, but I will be making some smaller decorations also. I want to glue it down for cutting it out. You sort of I have some extra paper from earlier practices. Let me just put that underneath so I don't get glue all over this panel. Some 3M Super 77. Yeah. Oh. Okay. That should do. I'll mostly be using the jigsaw for cutting it out, though I admit I might sneak onto the bandsaw a couple of times. Not gonna lie, I prefer the bandsaw over the jigsaw because with the jigsaw you've got an up and down, so especially with this paper pattern it can pull up on the pattern, whereas the bandsaw is always cutting down, so it's really good for cutting with a pattern. But the jigsaw was certainly better for the start because I'm such a big awkward piece, and it's mandatory now because I have to do all these inside cuts. So first I'm going to drill some holes to make it easy to get the bit in. First I'm going to drill some holes so that it's easy to get the blade of the jigsaw in. And I forgot to start the camera. Nice big drill bit. This super thin hardboard is really floppy, so I don't want it to be hanging way off the end of the bench. So for cutting these little pieces out, I brought it over to my workbench, and I'm going to position things here so it's supported on either side. This is going to make it a bit tedious because I have to move it and clamp it and move it and clamp it, but I wouldn't want it to break. I have a pretty big jigsaw also, so you need to have room to swing it around, and this is not going to be easy to film. That's one. Now another option, I guess, is a scroll saw, which I virtually never use, but the jigsaw is really annoying me, so I'm running this at high speed, but I'm just letting the camera roll through the entire cutting operation. Just wanted you to see all the twisting and turning that you have to do as you're doing a large cut on this. Well, it's certainly quieter, but again, you got the same issue as with the bandsaw, that I've got this big awkward thing that I have to swing around. Well, it's a lot easier to change directions than it is. Yeah, I think it's worth continuing with this thing. There we go. Here's the thing. I have a pretty rotten scroll saw. My jigsaw is also not the greatest. But the scroll saw, even with all the fiddling, was easier than the jigsaw. My jigsaw is like over 25 years old. It's very heavy, and I find it to be a bit on the rough side. If you have a nice jigsaw that you quite like, tell me about it down below. I wouldn't be opposed to getting a better one. Even though I don't use it that much, when you want it, you want a nice one. So I don't think you need a bandsaw or a scroll saw. They might make things easier, but I could have done all of this with the jigsaw. But again, I just wish I had a better jigsaw. Okay, and let's get the paper off. Oh, yeah, I was afraid of that. I think I put a bit too much glue on. You want to have a light touch with the spray adhesive. I'm going to fight with this and cut back to when it's done. Just want to clean all the fuzzies off the edge here from the cutting. And so then I also doodled up a little bat shape, and I printed off a couple of those, and you'll notice that there's no grid lines on these because it doesn't really matter, you know, print them as big or as small as you want. Like, I've made one larger one and one, you know, about 80% that I printed out. And I'm going to cut those out so those can be up on the corners of the door also. And this time I was a lot lighter with the spray glue and it's coming off a lot easier. Now I'm also, these were a lot quicker, so maybe time has something to do with it also. There we go. And so very quickly I got two little bats. Now all of these are going to be, the idea is that these are going to be silhouettes, or shadows hanging on my front door. So I'm going to spray paint them all black now. And there we go after one heavy coat. And here's what it looks like after the paint has dried. I was imagining this shadow hanging on the door, looking just like that with, you know, with a little bat on top of it. So yeah, it's neat when something turns out exactly like you had in your head. This did require a little bit of extra work because there was glue residue left over because the 3M glue had stuck too hard, and there was a few spots where it was showing through the paint because I hadn't cleaned it off properly. So after the first coat, I had to go and sand in a few spots and then spray it again. Also earlier, I talked about how the panel had weighed about 5 pounds. This is like, hang on. This finished piece is 32 inches tall and it's 14, 15 inches wide at the widest point, and it weighs hardly anything. And just to verify that, I brought my scale down here. Let me just balance this here. Just under 450 grams. That works out to just under a pound for my imperial loving friends. And you know, these bats, these are barely more than a piece of paper. As I mentioned previously, I bought a stack of rare earth magnets for hanging them on the door, and I just picked these out online. They're 25 millimeters in diameter and each one is 2 millimeters thick. And I went back to check the listing and it doesn't actually say what is the weight rating for carrying stuff, but plenty of people had left comments about, you know, holding an entire calendar or something. But now that I know how light this is, I'm not worried at all. I'm putting two, one at the top and one at the bottom, partly just to keep it from moving around like that, but I'm pretty sure one will be enough. And for these also, one is going to be plenty. They come with these little self-adhesive pads for putting on the magnets, but I'm just being a little paranoid and I think I'm going to use 5-minute epoxy because I've had situations before where I hung something on the door and the magnet stuck to the door and the item I was hanging just ripped off the magnet, which is, you know, not fun. So hopefully the 5-minute epoxy will do better. I put a 1-inch Forstner bit in my drill and I'm going to use that just to make a tiny shallow little recess where I can locate the magnet. It does have this little point on it, which I'm afraid might come through the other end, but so that's why I just want something that'll help it locate itself so it doesn't slide around. Yeah, there's a little dent there. I might have to hit this with another little shot of spray paint. Luckily, I've got a month until Halloween. Need to carefully slide the magnet to the side. There's 1, 2, 3, and make sure they're well apart from each other. Each magnet comes with a little plastic spacer which helps you with getting them apart. This is the 5-minute epoxy I'm using. I bought this at Lee Valley, as I recall. I like this stuff because it's really not critical. I just make a dollop of one, and then I make a similar sized dollop of the other. You know, I think I'm going to need a bit more. Hang on, a little bit more. That's roughly equal, and then mix it up. You know, I'll experiment on this one because I think it's got more room for squeeze out. Just put a dollop in there and, oh, that's way too much. Oh yeah, that's way too much. Well, and the last one. It's actually oozing out from the side, which I don't mind because number one, this is the back, but number two, I want it to really grip around the edges of each magnet so that they are firmly locked into position. This is 5-minute epoxy, but I'm not in a rush and I really want this to make a good bond, so I'm just going to leave this probably overnight and we'll come back to it tomorrow when this is well and truly dry, and then I'll show it to you on the front door. And it's now the next day and the epoxy is well and truly dried and solid. These magnets seem like they are solidly affixed. So off to the front door. And this was going to go in the middle, and one there, one there. And that's what I had in mind. These are black silhouettes, and then the color of the door shows through the different cutouts for the face to give you the contrast. This is actually my second time here. I've added 2 more magnets because I found 2 magnets weren't enough. They held well, but they would slide. Magnets will slide even though they might not pull away. And here it is on the inside of our door. I just thought I would show you what it looks like on a much lighter colored door. I think it looks okay on the red door, but I think it looks better on the light colored door. It's early afternoon right now. Stick around to the end of the video and I'll show you some clips of what this looks like in the dark. So I've shown you how to make a silhouette like the one that I did, but if you'd rather just trace something, I do have a plan package on my website with the patterns that I used, as well as 2 others. I've got the 3 pumpkin stack that I made, as well as a couple versions of my bat. I've got a larger one and a slightly small one, but again, these just print them at like 60% or 50% or 120%, whatever size you want. And while I was waiting for the paint to dry, I made another 3 pumpkin stack with 3 different faces, though the outline is exactly the same. And finally, I also made just a one pumpkin under a witch's hat, if you'd like something like that. And again, these are all available on 1-to-1 grids. But for example, you know, if you don't like this size, print it at 120%, 150%, or at 50%, you know, just shrink it up and down to what you want. Just so there's no confusion, what I'm showing you are my original full-size doodle templates that I drew on. The plan package is a big PDF, which has been broken up into individual pages, so anyone with a regular printer could print these off and then cut them up and put them together. Those are available on my website. The link is in the video description down below, or it'll come up on the end screen of the video, but I think otherwise that's about it. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you got some ideas that you can use for yourself on Halloween, and we'll see you next time.